Never underestimate someone's looks, gender, or age. Anyone could belong in a prison cage.
You're an absolute gem. Thank you for clicking on my Suspect series. I'm Brooke Makenna, and this is another one of my 16 days of Halloween where I'm posting every other day in October. Now, this video is about a serial killer who is a female. And I know that there is not many of those, or not many that are talked about, which is exactly why I wanted to do this video. And it makes it even creepier because her motive was nothing you would ever possibly expect. By the way, if you are excited about me posting so much content this month, I would love if you would support by subscribing, by thumbsing up, by sharing the video, anything you can possibly do, and I would love to just talk to you down below in the comments. Now let's get back to the story. It was 1994 in Canyon Lake, Riverside County in California. On February 16th, in a gated community and where elders lived, and it was a quiet and peaceful place, a woman named Alice Williams went over to check on her neighbor who she was worried about because she hadn't seen her in a while. Her name was Norma Davis, and she was 86 years old, living alone in her house. So Alice went over to kind of check on her, see if she was okay, and what she found was that Norma had been dead for 2 days. And you're thinking, okay, she was an elderly woman, she passed away in her sleep. No, this 86-year-old had been murdered, brutally. She had been strangled and stabbed 11 times. The knife, both knives actually, were still in her body when she was found. There was a wood-handled utility knife that was in her neck that was so deeply in there that it almost took her head completely off. There was also another knife, a fillet knife, still sticking out of her chest. The only other injury on her body was a broken fingernail. A bloody Afghan was at her feet, and there was a small Nike shoe print. There was also a ripped out phone cord and a smear of blood on the first floor armchair. But when the police got there, there was no sign of forced entry. There was still a social security check for $148 laying there, so they kind of ruled out the possible robbery motive. And because it was so brutal in the stabbings, they believed it was possibly someone who knew her. Norma's family told police that she always had the door locked unless she was expecting someone over, and they couldn't remember she had had somebody over the day that she was murdered. Then 12 days later, on February 28th, while the police were still investigating Norma's murder, another woman was murdered in the same Canyon Lake gated community. She was 66-year-old June Roberts. She had been strapped to the chair, strangled with a curly cord from her phone, and beaten over the head with a wine bottle from her home. Her autopsy said she had a moderately deep ligature furrow and had a 6x3 purple contusion. After June was dead, her killer was thought to steal the credit cards from her purse and head out for a shopping spree in Temecula, because an hour after the murder, June's card was charged for a crab cake and scampi at Bailey's Wine and Country Cafe. Then a charge of $164.76 for a woman's haircut and eyebrow wax and a young boy's haircut. A black suede jacket and several pairs of cowboy boots cost $511, and then a pair of drop-down diamond earrings were charged, costing $161. Then away from the shopping center at a drugstore, dog treats were bought, as well as 2 bottles of Smirnoff and a toy helicopter. When the police investigated and talked to the employees that would have been there when this killer was there, the stylist actually said that the woman had mentioned going on a shopping spree, but that when she signed June Roberts, that it seemed like it was her, that nothing seemed that fishy. But just like before, when they were investigating, another woman was attacked, except for this time she survived. She was 57-year-old Dorinda Hawkins, and she actually owned an antique store in Lake Elsinore in about 16 minutes from Canyon Lake. It was March 10th, and this lady walked in. She was buying a photo frame, and she also asked to see a painting that was behind Dorinda on the shelf. Dorinda turned around, she bent down to grab it and felt a rope around her neck. She then began to strangle her, but Dorinda had the broom and was kind of trying to stab her with it, but she eventually did black out from the lack of air. And $5 was stolen from her purse, $20 from the register, and then the killer fled. Another shopping spree began after that, using the $25 as well as still using June's credit cards. Dorinda was left for dead, but she was actually wearing a very thick turtleneck sweater, which essentially helped her from dying. So she woke up, called the police, and was able to give them a description of this woman. She said she was petite and blonde with wavy hair. She was well dressed, driving a brown Cadillac, and that when she was killing her, it was like she had done it before because she had such flat eyes. She also said that she almost sounded like she was a nurse because while she was killing her, or trying to, she kept saying, "Relax, just relax," in a very calm tone like a nurse would say if somebody was in pain. The police made a composite sketch due to that description and sent it out to the newspapers the next day. But still, nobody was called in, nobody was brought in, and she wasn't being caught. And 6 days later, on March 16th, unfortunately, another woman was attacked, and this time she was killed. She was 87, and her name was Dora Beebe, and she was living about 17 miles away from Canyon Lake in Sun City. She had been strangled and beaten to death with a household iron from her home after returning from a doctor's appointment. An hour later, another shopping spree began, this time using Dora's credit cards. And later that day, her boyfriend of 8 years, Louis Dormand, actually found her body. The entire communities being attacked were basically ones for retirees and elders and people who went there to feel safe and secure with their gated communities, but that security was lacking. They felt so scared, and most of them actually went to live with other relatives, other places, just to be safe. Some even went together, just lived in one house for a while, just, strengthen numbers, but a lot of people in the communities believed that it was almost a ritual sacrifice from a cult nearby, because there had been pentagrams actually made in the grass of the golf courses nearby, and the fact that there had only been one real suspect in these murders so far. Her name was Jerry Armbrust, and she actually had a connection to the first victim, Norma Davis. She had been actually married to Norma's son, but after Norma's son died, she continued to take care of Norma in her poor health. She had just had triple bypass surgery, and she was just there to, take care of her, to go see her every once in a while. And Jerry claimed to actually be there the day of the murder. She dropped off groceries, but she heard a TV on loud upstairs, figured that Norma had fallen asleep to it and didn't want to bother her, so she went ahead and left. She was also wearing Nike shoes at that time. Now, the police really thought that it was odd behavior that she would not check on someone who she was basically taking care of, who was in her old age, who was having health problems, that she would just kind of leave without at least saying hello or looking at her. But that was really the only evidence they had against her, and she seemed genuine in her grief, so they really decided to start looking elsewhere. After that, she actually began helping the main detective in the case, Joseph Greco, and just giving him any information that he needed, just helping in any way possible. And then they found that the pentagrams were actually from teenagers just messing around. So the thought of an actual cult being the murderers didn't really fit anymore either. Detectives Joseph Greco and Chris Antoniadis were actually the leads in this investigation. They were talking to a lot of people about, the descriptions, trying to put it together, when they actually got a call from June Roberts' family, the second victim, saying that they had just gotten a call saying that somebody was spending excessive amounts of money with June's credit cards. From that, they found that the killer had actually dyed her hair, and from the witnesses, the employees, they also found that she would bring a little boy named Jason with her, and sometimes a tall, dark-haired man. That's when Jerry, the original suspect, decided that she had something she needed to tell the police. She believed she knew who the killer was, because her stepdaughter, Dana Sue Gray, had just dyed her hair red and had a boyfriend with a son named Jason. The same day Detective Greco was writing Dana a search warrant, she was actually killing Dora Beebe. And the police nearby knew nothing of what Jerry had said of the confession of Dana herself. They knew nothing of that, but they were actually following Dana because they were looking out for someone who was going on shopping sprees, and Dana was at that time after Dora's murder. They had been trailing her as she went to the bank to cash Dora's check. Then she went to all the different stores, and they were actually watching her unload shopping bags out of her trunk when they learned of Dora Beebe's murder. Later that day, when all the clues finally came together, they arrested Dana Sue Gray at her home in Lake Elsinore, and she was wearing the drop-down diamond earrings. They also took in her boyfriend and his son for questioning. They searched her home then and found Beebe's credit cards in her lingerie drawer, as well as clothes all over the place with tags still on them and different items placed separate places like if she was hiding Christmas presents. She had boxes of Nike shoes, she had a purple boogie board, she had perfume bottles, a mountain bike, and these all cost hundreds to thousands of dollars. On the way to the station, she talked excessively and she was so excited about her new boogie board. But when she got there and they asked her about the credit cards, she said that she didn't steal them, that she found them, and when she found them, she knew that she had an excessive need to shop. She felt at ease after doing it, and so she decided to use them to shop. Detective Antoniadis was basically known for being able to get a confession out of someone. He would either try to get them to trust him, relate to them, or he would use religion or insecurities to scare them into a confession. But with Dana, he had no idea what to do. She was cold and unresponsive, had no sympathy for the victims, and so he resulted in just basically screaming at her at the end, telling her to confess that he knew that it was her, and that didn't work either. Since they couldn't get a confession out of her, they charged her with the murder of Dora Beebe because they had the evidence of the cards in her home, but they also had evidence of Dorinda and June as well. Dorinda, who was the girl who was attacked and survived, was actually asked to identify her attacker in a lineup, and she picked Dana Sue Gray. It was then found that June Roberts' husband was actually Dana's father's best friend. But the first murder, Norma, actually had an even bigger connection. Norma Davis was definitely not a stranger. In fact, she knew her very well with her stepmother taking care of her. But that was one murder she wouldn't be charged with because there was far more evidence against the other two, and her condition to plead guilty was that she would not be charged with that murder. At first, she pleaded insanity after hearing the possible death penalty. But then when a witness came forward saying that she had seen Dana at June Roberts' house the day she was murdered, she had no choice but to basically admit guilt to Dora and June's murders and the attempt at murder of Dorinda. Then on October 16th, 1998, she was finally sentenced to life without parole at the California Women's Prison in Coachella. She was put in high security prison next to serial killer William Cerf. But she seemed to really almost like it there. She thought of it as a county condo and would insist eating a vegetarian diet. She wanted to see her chiropractor. She would draw creepy clown faces with M&M's candy coating, and when her family brought her Nike shoes, she would always refuse them, saying she didn't want the cheap brand, she wanted the real kind. But in private and seen only in letters to a fellow inmate, she was completely different. In one letter saying, "I am a 36-year-old little girl with a broken heart, lost in a system that's hell-bent to destroy her. I am vulnerable." So who is Dana Sue Gray really? Let's get a little into her backstory. She was born December 6, 1959 as Dana Sue Armbrust to Beverly and Russell. He was a hairdresser, she was a former beauty queen, and Beverly, her mother, seemed to have had spending problems as well as anger issues, which eventually led to their divorce when Dana was only 2. Dana barely saw her father after that, which led to her wanting to do bad things to get attention. She would steal things like candy and money to get candy. She would throw a fits if she didn't get her way. Relatives say at a very young age she refused to be told no. She wasn't any better in school though, and she actually got suspended several times for forging notes to get out of class. But at 14, her mother Beverly actually developed cancer. That is when her mother died of breast cancer, and she had to move in with her father and her stepmother Jerry, who was taking care of her ex-mother-in-law, Norma Davis. Norma was the one that found the marijuana in her bedroom when she was a teenager, and her father kicked her out of the house for that. She moved in with a skydiving instructor boyfriend named Rob and finished high school. She graduated Newport Harbor High School in 1976, and in her yearbook she put that her favorite pastime was getting in trouble. Then she went on to nursing school to become like the nurses who had helped her mother those few years ago. During this time, Rob had actually gotten her pregnant twice and forced her to get rid of the baby both times. In 1981, she graduated from nursing school, and 6 years later, she had been separated from Rob for a while and actually married a boy she knew from high school, Tom Gray, who was a machine operator, and they met through work. They moved into Canyon Lake, and she was working as a labor and delivery nurse at the time, but her spending got really bad, just like her mother's had in the past. relatives of Tom actually said that everything was sacrificed to the god of narcissism in her eyes. They were so far into debt, but Dana actually inherited $7,500 from some random inheritance, and instead of using it towards bills, she decided to go to Europe by herself, not even take Tom, and spend it all. Her husband filed for divorce, and she moved in with a lover of hers named Jim Wilkins and his son Jason. She was then fired from her job for 21 doses of missing painkillers. 3 months later, on the day of Norma's death, Dana had actually asked the relatives of Tom to ask him if she could see him. He refused to have any direct contact with her, so she had asked through relatives if he would meet her. He agreed, but he never actually showed up that day because he had a very bad feeling. She then took Norma's life, but who she really wanted to take the life of was Tom. She had actually taken an insurance policy out on him. They would pay most of her debt off. Then with June Roberts' murder, she said that she was actually headed to see her father, who lived in the gated community at Canyon Lake, when she saw June raking leaves. But she also told another psychologist that she had actually went especially to go see June to borrow a book of vitamins, but she gave her the wrong book, which made her angry. But then she said, because remember, June kind of knew Dana in a sense because, you know, June's husband knew Dana's father, so she also said that June had made a comment about Dana and Tom's marriage, saying that Dana didn't do enough. Dana was angered by this, so that is why she killed her. Psychologists kind of found a pattern that Dana always felt like these women were looking down on her, so they asked her why she felt that way, and she just said that's what happened. All three. She said with June, she left Jason in the car with her. She went up, knocked on the door, followed her into the house, strangled her with a phone cord, but when June tried to fight back, she hit her over the head with a wine bottle. She said that she lost it and became consumed with what she was doing, and after that, she went on a shopping spree with Jason. She said with Dorinda, it was random because Dana had walked into this antique shop and she felt like Dorinda instantly put her down, and she did this by giving her a look that said, "Can I help you?" and then also crossing her arms, which was condescending to Dana, and so she had this instant feeling in her stomach that she wanted to throw up and that she wanted to kill her. But Dana said she fainted and wasn't actually choked unconscious, so that is why Dana left her to be able to live. When the description came out of Dana, she then went to dye her hair red. With Dora, she said it was after a visit where she went to visit her father. She got lost. She stopped at Dora's house, knocked on the door, and asked for directions. She said that Dora was very rude about it, said she didn't have time, but headed inside anyway to look for a map. Dana was very angered by the fact that she wasn't showing her respect, and so when Dora turned around to grab the map and was still complaining, Dana just went ahead and choked her with a phone cord, then hit her over the head with an iron and killed her. She said it wasn't much of a fight. Minutes later, she was withdrawing $1,700 from Dora's bank and was being followed by police, which she had no idea about, and they didn't know anything about her yet either. There's no question to if she is a little bit insane, but the real question is, how'd she get that way? Or what happened? Or was she born with it? Lots of people have researched her case and into her childhood because we like to think that, you know, past trauma is what caused all of this, that if she would have had a better childhood, that none of this would have happened. But with Dana, there wasn't much to blame it on, and none of the usual signs like animal abuse or anything was there to warn anyone. One day, it just seemed like she simply snapped. And I read a quote from a law professor who studies criminal behavior, who specializes in it, and I really kind of agree with what she said. She said, people are looking for horrible childhoods as excuses to explain their behavior, but the more I look at it, the more I think it's in the brain. As in, these people sometimes are just born with it. But what do you think? What are your opinions on that? Because I'd love to know if you believe that it has to just be how your upbringing is, or if some people are just born evil. In my opinion, I think a lot of the times people are just born evil, but they can be made that way as well. But another thing that researchers have found interesting is that there's high connections to female serial killers and nurses. And some believe Dana was killing long before this little spree because she was a nurse. and was possibly doing it with those painkillers that had gone missing. Another psychologist actually said something that I love too, and it was, I think there's a lot of reluctance to admit that society's nurturers can be killers. Just because you don't hear about them doesn't mean they're not there. They're just better and quieter, and they get away with it. But since being in prison, because she's in there for life, Dana has actually went to selling items on murderabilia websites, which I had no idea existed, and that's the creepiest thing in the world. But she actually sold a pair of her underwear that were signed for $250. So why do you think Dana began to kill in 1994? Or do you think she'd been doing it all along and just got away with it those times? This case may be solved, but it's one of the ones where I have the most questions, because the why and why she did it, because we do know kind of the motive that she wanted to, go on these shopping sprees, but she could have found other means to steal money or credit cards, just robbery and not the killing. So there's still a lot of questions in this case, and let me know down below your opinions. I'd love to hear them, but make sure to thumbs up if you're excited for me posting so much content. And yeah, so don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.
Unfortunately, it's the ones you least expect that are usually the suspects.